a what? So it is primarily a platform for developing distributed applications for cloud. So you are going to make use of Aneka and you are going to make a platform. For what purpose you are going to make a platform? You are going to make a platform for developing the distributed applications. Okay, so we are going to develop the distributed applications for that particular distributed applications. You are going to develop a platform. So now, if you are developing a software platform, so even if we develop the software platform, it requires the infrastructure so on which it has to be deployed, because if I develop the application, it is we are not going to host that one, or we are not going to run that particular application. So even if you are building that particular application, so you require some platform. So that particular software platform, what it requires, so even if I want to run that one, it requires the underlying system should be there, that is infrastructure should be there, on which it has to be deployed. And after having that particular software platform is deployed, so that particular infrastructure what you're going to have or utilized, so that has to be managed. So yesterday I told you that depending upon the requirement of the user, or depending upon the usage of the application, that means when you take about the data, that is with respect to the compute intensive application and with respect to the data intensive applications. So when you're going with the data intensive applications or compute intensive applications, the requirement for your infrastructure will be different. Okay, the requirement for the infrastructure will be different. So even that particular infrastructure has to be managed at that time. So now when you are talking about the infrastructure management tool, so they are specifically designed for this particular task. So the infrastructure management tool which is running under your cloud, so that will be depending upon the depending upon the type of the deployment model. So if whether you are going to purchase rent that particular infrastructure from the outside, so then it will become a public cloud. So if you are renting from if you are giving the infrastructure from your own premises or organization, then it will become the private cloud. So when you are applying and when you are accessing those particular infrastructure, so those particular infrastructure has to be managed properly. So in here, Aneka Cloud, what it is going to have, we are going to have the infrastructure management tools. Okay, so that is specifically designed to manage this particular platform. How which node has to be given, which node has to be given with the proper application, proper infrastructure. That is how much computing speed has to be given, and how much space has to be allocated for that particular node. So these things has to be managed, right? So for that particular reason, we should have some infrastructure management tool. So which are specifically designed for that particular task. So which are necessarily designed for that particular task. So next once you are going to have the Aneka. So Aneka is going to support you the different types of deployment models. So the deployment models which are going to already we have stated that the deployment models are public, private, and hybrid. So already we know that public is nothing but what? All other infrastructure will be rented. Okay, you are going to deploy the platform. So you are going to run the applications. So that means everything will be rented out. So I am not going to have any infrastructure in my own organization or any data centers in my own organization. When it comes to the private cloud, the company which is providing the software platform, so that company itself will provide you the infrastructure. Okay, some secure data should be there. So some secure data, I cannot keep it in the third party vendor. So what that time I will do, so I will keep that particular data in my organization only, within my organization only, so that uh, other people cannot access those particular data. That I am giving the security for that particular data. So when you have that particular issues with you in the cloud, that is with respect to the security and privacy, so we are going with the private cloud. So then is hybrid cloud. So when it comes for the hybrid cloud, so some part will be some resources which has to be kept secret, or which has to be maintained privacy. So that we are going to keep it in your own organization, and some which are not that much secure, which we require. Those data we are going to keep it in the third party service provider, or you are going to access the resources from the third party resource provider. So now these things will be taken care by the provisioning management system or infrastructure management system. So under your framework. So now next comes to the Aneka cloud infrastructure overview. You can see it here. So you're going to have the cloud here. In the middle, you're going to have the cloud here. So you can have the clouds. Okay. So it is as the globe, it is going to implement with respect to the cloud. It is going to tell that these particular Aneka nodes which are there, so that will be distributed all across the globe. So the node managers will be distributed all across the globe, because so whenever you are going to create a number of nodes, so that has to be managed. So all these node managers which are there, which are connected across the globe, will be managed by a single management console. So here you are going to have the management console. That particular management console is going to internally is going to manage all these node managers. Okay, so that means the deployment will be there all across the globe, or nothing but your data center, what we are going to call it by. So that means in America, it may be having one node manager. So in USA, in UK, you may have another node manager, and in Australia, you can have another manager, and you can have in China another one manager. So all these things, it has to be controlled, right? So because I am the owner, I have to control all these nodes. So now this will be internally controlling their own in that particular area. This particular node manager is going to control within the node within that particular area. But all this node belongs to this particular company, right? So that means it has to control this particular manager now. So that particular management console, what it is going to manage is it is going to it is going to manage the node managers here. So that is one Aneka containers, 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the node managers which are going to have. Now, when you are managing this one, how these particular resources are accessed, so it has to be accessed through some web browser or some HTTP mechanism you should have, and you have to use it using the HTTP mechanism. So these repositories which are there, Aneka repository. So in Aneka repository, what is going to have? So it's going to have some libraries, that is almost a built-in libraries will be there. So to access the some of the resources, because some of the functionalities has to be uh, accessed. To access that particular functionalities, you require some libraries. So now those repository which are there in the Aneka repository, that can make library available through different communication channel. So that means we are going to have the internet. So when you are going to tell about the cloud, all these components or all these resources are internally connected through the internet. Okay, all these are internally connected through the internet. So once it is connected through the internet, then only it is called. Then only they can share the resources in an effective and efficient way. So now here the management console which can have here, so that will manage the multiple repositories. So it can have either it is shown in this particular figure, it's going to show only one repository. So even it can manage multiple repositories and select the one which best suits the specific deployment. That means many repository will be there. So I don't know what type of deployment is suitable for that particular vendor, that particular user or client. So depending upon the requirement of the depending upon the requirement, that particular specific deployment has to be done. So now the infrastructure has to be deployed in such a manner in such a way that so it has to organize a collection deployed by harnessing a collection of nodes and the installation on them the Aneka node manager. Okay, so here what we are going to have is, so whenever you are going to deploy the cloud, so I have to view in such a way that so what so because this may suit a different this may suit different type of configuration. This particular node can have the different type of configuration. This particular node may have the different type of configuration. Okay, so now it has to the management, what it has to do, the manager, it has to serve in such a way that which node is suitable for which purpose. The management console should know that which node is suitable for which purpose. Now some may be having the 2.1 gigahertz server, some may be requiring the 1.4 gigahertz server, or some may be requiring a 3.2 gigahertz server, or some may be requiring the for some other high configuration server. Depending upon the requirement, that particular depending upon that particular requirement, that particular node will be chosen, and it will be given in such a way that and fashioned in such a way that so it will be seamless to the user. So now, for example, I told you that it's a simple example of having that I told that to have the data intensive applications to run, I want the high-end processing speed in production. So now somebody else would have been used at that time, the other resource data intensive application processing speed infrastructure. So at that time, I have to give that particular CPU speed by taking from the other vendors. So that's how it is going to be have in your cloud bus. So now if you take with respect to infrastructure point of view, so the management of physical or virtual nodes is performed uniformly as long as it is possible to have internet connection. As I told you that. So now it is going to be as long as the um, as long as you have the internet connection and remote administrative access to the node, so you can do the we can connect to the different clouds. Okay, that's what it is going to happen. So it can be done using the http or file share or through any of the web browsers also it can be done. Okay, so that's what you're going to have. So if you take the infrastructure point of view, so you can see it here, the same thing what I have told, the same thing has been written here. Okay, from the infrastructure point of view, the management of physical or virtual nodes is performed uniformly. So that means, so whatever the nodes you are going to have, so it will be performed uniformly as long as what? As long as the interconnection and remote administrative access to the node. So now, when you are going to have the when you are going to have the dynamic provisioning of virtual instances, because what do you mean by virtual instances? Virtual instances. So a different scenario is constituted by the dynamic provisioning of virtual instances. So these particular dynamic instances which are going to have, they are generally created by pre-packaged images. Okay, so these instances are having the pre-packaged images. That means images is nothing but the operating system package which you are going to have. So in your standard terms, we are going to call that one as an image. So from where you are going to install the operating system. Okay, so they are generally created by pre-packaged images, which is already contained in installation of Aneka. So that image you are going to take. So from that particular installation, so once you configure that particular instances, it will automatically install the Aneka. So then after installing the Aneka, I want only to be reconfigured. Okay, I want to need to be configured to join a specific Aneka cloud, because which cloud I have to, which service I have to take, or depending upon what type of service I am going to use from that particular Aneka. So depending upon that one, so that particular installation, that particular configuration will be done. So that you can use your Aneka cloud by freely downloadable. So okay, you can use that, you take as an assignment, and when you are home, when you are free, you can download that one and you can use it. And you can see that how to create the master node, how to create the slave node, node manager, how to create the bus master, and these things you should know. So the master node, slave node, so how to create it, how to interact with the master node and the slave node. So you just download it and you see to it how this particular Aneka is configured. So only when you do it in a practical way, you come to know exactly how the cloud works. Okay. So if you don't do it in a practical way, it will become difficult for you to understand what is cloud is all about. Okay. So for that particular reason, so since you and I have shared you people the how to work with the Google Cloud, so you register for that one, you can use the Google Cloud also. So because I think most of you have done the Google Cloud course, I think. So you just go through with that one and you have an idea of that one. Okay. So next one is how done that one. So here it is a logical organization of worker node. So now when you are going to have logical organization, you can see it here. So now here you are going to have the master node. So n number of master node is connected to all the other worker node and the storage node. So you can see it here. So we are going to have the worker node. So worker node, what is the functionality of the worker node? The worker node functionality is to execute it, allocate it, mandatory options which you are going to have, that has to be provisioned. Mandatory provisioning, what will be there, that has to be provided by your worker node. So now when it comes to the storage node, so that means where you are going to keep the storage. Okay. So what you are going to have in the storage, that has to be kept in mind. So there the storage you are going to have, and what are the different mandatory requirements you are going to have. So almost we have common configuration of the master node if you are going to have. So since it is already been discussed already, a common configuration of the master node will be as what you can see it here. It is going to index it. So index service, that is going to keep the master copy of that one. So heartbeat service, as I informed you already, that What do you mean by heartbeat service? Service is going to tell you that whether my node is working properly or not. Okay. So now next is logging service. So logging service, this already we have been discussed. Okay. So the logging, it is going to the master node is going to provide this particular configuration and it has to give this particular service. Then you are going to have the logging service. Logging service is nothing but what? So at what time you have been entered and what time you have been gone, how much you have been utilized the resources from that particular place, that you have to keep that one. And some of the services has to be kept full time. Now for that particular services, some infrastructure resources should be there, that I have to reserve that particular resources. For that particular reason, you are going to have the reservation service in your master node. So this particular master node will be having the reservation services. You can see it here. So next, after having the master node, so resource provisioning should be there. Okay, resource provisioning should be there. So we are going to have the resource provisioning. After having the resource provisioning, so you are going to have the mandatory requirements like your accounting services, reporting and accounting services, and some of the other services which has to be there for look after the master node. And you can see it here, failover is there, right? What is the function of the failover is the next. So if you take the failover here, failover is going to occur. Failover is nothing but what? It is going to keep the backup. The master node is giving the facility to all the worker node. But meantime, for some of the issues, your master node goes down. So now when it goes down, so the service which you are providing, that should not be interrupted. The service which you are providing, that should not be interrupted. So what it will happen if the failover occurs here? If the failover occurs here, whatever the task or job it is performing in this particular master, that will be shifted to this particular master now. Okay, so whenever the failover is going to occur, so the job is going to shift from during failover. If you take the during failover, the responsibility of the one master will be transferred to, the responsibility is transferred to another master node. Okay, so the other master node which you are going to have, which will be having the same functionality. Okay, so this will be having the same functionality as of this particular master. So the master node which is going to have this here, it also provide you the what? RDBMS facility, that is real-time database management system, where the state of several services is maintained. Okay, for that particular reason, the scheduling services are maintained in the master only. The scheduling services are maintained in the master only, because what it has to do, so since we are providing the real-time database management services, RDBMS service, so here whatever the work it is going, okay, whatever the work whatever in which state that particular database is there, so I should know that one. So to monitor that particular activity, what type of database and what work that particular database is doing, so I have to keep that particular schedule, that particular RDBMS services in the master node only. Now, after having that one, so you are going to have the scheduling services which will be kept inside your master node itself. So now, what the worker node consists of? So here the worker node constitutes. The worker node mainly constitutes the workforce of the Anika cloud. So it mainly worker node, what it is going to do is, it is mainly constitutes the workforce of the Anika cloud. And what is the purpose of this particular worker node? The purpose of the worker node is configured in such a way that it should execute an application, because now the master node will not execute the application. Your worker node is going to execute the application, but whatever you are going to execute it, whatever the node it is going to execute it, that has to be monitored, right? For how much time it has been running, for how much time it has, for how many, what are the resources it is consuming, what type of infrastructure it is using, that has to be keep track of, that has to be reported. So why we have to report it? So to bill accordingly, because I want to generate the revenue. So how I am going to generate the revenue? I am going to generate the revenue depending upon the usage of the depending upon the usage, depending upon the usage of my resources. Okay, so now that particular services which are going to have these particular things which are there, so which provide for the execution of the applications. So this is the worker node. So this is mandatory because the execution of the application is done at the worker node. Now, since the execution of the application is done at the worker node, so this is mandatory. Okay, this particular execution of the service is a mandatory one, mandatory service, and a specific execution services are each supported by your master node. That each services will be supported programming model of the cloud. So now here, when it comes to the worker node also, so there are many configuration which you are going to have in your worker node. What are the different configuration you are going to have? Like it is going to have the index service, it is going to have the heartbeat service, it is going to have the logging service, it is going to have the allocation service. So allocation service is nothing but what? It's going to provide you the different services. Okay, it's going to provide you the different services. So what type of service you have to provide, that you have to keep track of that one. Okay, so now when it comes to the storage node, so what is the different functionality of the storage node? So why we require the storage node? So the storage node is basically required or to provide storage support for this particular application which is executing in the worker node. Okay, so your worker node is working with respect to the application execution. But if the execution application has to work, means what? You require the data. To have the data, I have to contact the storage node where the data will be kept. Now, when you are going to have the storage node, I should know that how many storage node is required, because depending upon the intensity of the application, that many storage node will be provided. So now here, what is the number of storage nodes depends upon the predicted workload and storage computation made by application. As I told you that depending upon the type of the node and the type of the data which it requires, so that particular storage node has to be optimized in that particular fashion. Now, if you take the common configuration of the storage node, so here the for every node, if you take either it may be a master node or it may be a storage node or it may be a worker node. So you should have a service which we keep track that whether that particular node is working properly or not. So to check that particular node is working properly or not, what type of service you require? What type of service? Can anyone tell? We have discussed, right? We have discussed logging services there, reservation services there, index services there, heartbeat services there. So to keep track of whether that particular node is working fine or not, what service is mandatory? Anyone answer? Can anyone answer? Out of this service, which service is mandatory to look that whether that particular node is working fine or not? Can anyone answer? Yes or no? That's it. If it is no, we will tell and we will move on. So you are going to have the heartbeat service. So heartbeat service is common. Heartbeat service is common for all your master node, worker node, and storage node. So what is the purpose of the heartbeat service? The heartbeat service is going to keep track that whether that particular node is working fine or not. So whether it is up or down. So if it is down, what I need to do? What if any failure is going to occur? How I have to shift that one? So everything it has to be maintained. Apart from that one, even the storage node, what it requires, the storage node requires, even the storage node requires the logging service. What do you mean by logging service? So how much time that particular data has been used, that you should know, right? And then, so how many space is been utilized in that particular storage? You should know that one. So then you have to have the monitoring service and storage service. So these are the different services which will be provided by your storage node or which will be configured. Okay. So storage nodes mainly where this particular storage node will be used is the storage node will be mainly used in the machines that are considerable disk space. So the storage node is going to be mainly used where we are going to have the considerable disk space. So where can accommodate the large amount of files. So where we are able to keep the large amount of files in that particular type of in that particular nodes, this particular storage node will be deployed. Okay. So this is how the logical organization of Anika is going to work. So the common services which is provided by your master node, storage node, and worker node are what? So your logging service, heartbeat service, allocation, monitoring service, and monitoring service. Okay. So apart from that one, you are going to provide you the execution service in your worker node. Okay. So the execution will be taken care by the worker node. So the execution will not be taken care by the master node. Okay. So now, after having the logical organization of Anika Cloud, so we will discuss how their deployment model is going to work. So we are going with the deployment models. Already we have discussed that. What are the deployment models you are going to have in cloud? What are the 3 deployment models? Can anyone answer? What are the 3 deployment models you are going to have? Can anyone tell what are the 3 deployment models?
Public, private.
Yeah, public, private, and hybrid. Okay. So apart
Hybrid.
from, yeah. So these are the 3 models. Now your Aneka, whatever you are going to have, so that can be deployed in any of the 3 models. Either it can be deployed in public cloud, or it can be deployed in private cloud, or it can be deployed in hybrid cloud. Okay. So now it comes to the private deployment model. So this is a typical architecture reference model which you are going to have when your Aneka is deployed in private mode. So that is this is nothing but your private cloud deployment. So you can see it here. When it comes to a private, what do you mean by private? So the organization which is providing that particular service will be having its own workstation, will be having its own cluster, will be having its own desktop machines, okay, and will be having its own virtual clusters. So that is, it is not relying on the other third party for all this infrastructure. So the infrastructure will be residing inside the organization itself. So now, so whenever you are going to create the Aneka cloud, so it is going to have the heterogeneous pool of resources. As I told you that, so since it is going to have the workstation also, there are different type of resources are there, right? So since it is going to have the different types of resources, they are going to specify that particular resources as heterogeneous type of resources. Now, whenever you are going to have this particular type of resources, okay, so they can be partitioned into different groups. Okay, so that can be when they are partitioned into different groups, so that those configuration which you are going to have when you are partitioned, so depending upon the type of the application which you are going to execute, that particular type of resources can be allocated. So depending upon the type of the application which need to execute it, so depending upon the type of the application, that particular resources will be given. Okay. So now you can see it here. So those who are comfortable with the Linux, okay, I'm telling those who are comfortable with the Linux. So just you go and study with respect to eucalyptus. Okay, the eucalyptus system is going to work fine, or virtual clusters which you are going to create. So that can be work with respect to Linux operating system. So if you are going to have that particular Linux system in your home, you can just install the eucalyptus. That is a freeware, free downloadable. So and then you can use that particular eucalyptus system. Okay, so that is freely downloadable. Okay, that is open source, and you can use it for your research purpose or from project purpose also. You can use that particular tool, that is eucalyptus. Okay, so now here, whenever you are going to integrate the virtual node provision from the local resources pool management, so we are going to have some of the Zen server will be there, and you are going to have the eucalyptus and OpenStack. These are the some of the pools which are going to have. So now if you take this particular figure, you can see from the figure that this is the typical representation of the private cloud. So if they ask in the exam, you have to write this particular figure and you have to explain. Okay, but 8 individual resources which you are going to have, it will be these particular resources will be available within the organization itself. within the organization itself. Okay, so now the master node is there. So what is the functionality of the master node? So the functionality of the master node is, one is it has to do the resource reservation, and other thing it has to do the application management and scheduling. Third, it is going to do the resource provisioning. So depending upon the type of the resource required, so that particular resource has to be provisioned for running that particular application, and it has to be managed by depending upon the application, whether you are going to run that particular application faster. So whether now, so when you are going to have this particular workstations cluster, so even some of the times you can make use of the desktop machine also, where you are going to make use of the desktop machines, because in your company I have a number of systems. So I'm in the employees is going to work from morning 9 to 6. So from evening 6 to morning 9 o'clock, there won't be any employee who is working on that particular system. Now I don't want the system to be wasted out. Okay, I don't want the system to be wasted out. So instead of making it to waste, so what I will do, I will give those system also as a resources to the other party, so that I can generate the revenue from that one. Okay, so that I can generate the negative revenue from that one. So this is where you are going to have the office automation. It can be exploited after the standard working hours. Okay, after the standard working hours, your desktop machine also can be used to execute the application from the cloud. Okay, by using the Aneka cloud. So this is typical representation of your private cloud. So a private means what? Within the organization. Okay, so it has to come that in your home, you are having your system, you are having the service, you are running the application which is required for you. Only thing is the application deployment is there in another cloud. That's it. So the application will be residing in the other cloud. So when it comes to the public cloud, you can see it here. Public is nothing but what? So when I don't have any resources, okay, so I will deploy that particular application or deployment platform in some other third-party services. So the third-party services, if I want to go for infrastructure, so I'm going to make use of Amazon EC2 instances. So where the Amazon EC2 stands for Elastic Compute Cloud. So the Elastic Compute Cloud, we are going to have the servers. So we are going to create the one master node, and we are going to have some slave nodes which are there. So depending upon the configuration, you can have that particular instances. So by paying that one. So even if it is now, I don't know. So almost it is free in the trial version. You are going to get it those services for free for 1 to 3 months. Okay, you can sign up to that one, and you can utilize that particular Amazon EC2 resources. Okay, so here you can see it here. So this particular is also deployed on some other cloud. So you can reporting, billing. So this is also deployed in some Amazon EC2 instances. So this entire boundary is called as EC2. That means EC2 is nothing but what? It is the service provided by the Amazon. So I am taking all the services from the third party. So that means that particular type of deployment is called as public cloud deployment mode. Okay. So next is hybrid cloud, which you are going to have. So in the hybrid cloud, what will happen? Some which are going to have secured one. Okay. Some secured versions you are going to have. Those secured you are going to have within your organization itself. So that is your infrastructure. So I'm going to have the local infrastructure which you are going to have. And I'm going to use some other features which is not a secured one, like Amazon Web Services, GoGrid, some of these services which you are processing, which is not that much secured one, or privacy where there is no privacy is required. So when you are going to have that particular type of scenario, you are going to make use of the hybrid cloud deployment. So now the most deployment model of the Aneka is hybrid cloud deployment only. So in most of the cases, wherever you are going to make use of the Aneka, so you are going to make use of the hybrid deployment model. So now here you can see that it is having the existing infrastructure. So you can, from the figure, you can see that it is going to have the existing infrastructure within the organization itself, and it can be given the access to address the computing needs of application. So with the help of the systems which are going to have here at the bottom, so it is going to provide you, it can be used to it can be used to address the computing needs of the application, because how much system is required to run particular application, how many systems you require. So depending upon the type of the application execution, I have to have that particular infrastructure to be provided. Now, so here whatever the infrastructure you are going to have are the static deployment of Aneka. That is, it is within the organization. So it is not dynamic, it is static. So it is a static deployment that can be elastically scaled on demand. That means depending upon the requirement of the application execution, I am going to increase or decrease my infrastructure. Okay. So now if you take the most complete deployment of Aneka, so there are what the different capabilities of the Aneka framework is, we have seen here. It is dynamic provisioning system. So we're going to have the dynamic provision service will be there. Resource reservation is there. Some from the figure you can see it here. Provisioning services, dynamic provisioning services is there. So whenever you require any services from the Amazon or GoGrid, you can directly access those particular resources, and you are going to have the resource reservation will be there. And then you're going to have the workload partition also will be there, becoming on the load balance. So workload partition should be there when you are going to have the load balance. So that means when the one system is not able to achieve the accuracy of the executing the application, I will transfer the load to other system. So that means at that time you require the partition of the load. So and then you should have the accounting, monitoring, and reporting services. So these are the some of the things which are going to have in hybrid deployment model. Okay, so this is how it will be deployed with respect to Aneka. So when you talk about the Aneka, the most of the times the Aneka is going to provide you the hybrid type of cloud only, because if you want to have some services to be taken like application, or if you want to have the storage as a service, then it is going to take it from the Amazon. That like S3 bucket is there, simple queue simple storage service is there in Amazon S3. So SSS, it is going to stand by. So where the number of buckets are created, so the buckets is nothing but the space where you are going to have. So when you are going to have the free time, you just go Google it and you see it. What do you mean by S3 bucket? Okay, you see to it. What do you mean by S3 bucket? What are the functionalities of how to create the bucket, and what should be the size of the bucket which you are going to have? These things you learn when you are going to have in your free time. Okay, so depending upon the requirement. So that is about your public private and private cloud. So then after that one, you are going to have the different service model in your cloud. Okay, so cloud programming management. So Pride is going to provide a scalable middleware product in it to execute distributed applications. So how we are going to program it and how we are going to manage it. So we are going to, as we have already discussed, that when you are going to have the programming, you should have some software development toolkit should be there, and software, and you are going to have some of the APIs, that is application programming in request will be there, through which you are going to access some of the services. Like if you have the second, I want to access the other network, you should have the some socket programming like that. Socket API should be there where you can have the access to the other network. So these are the some of the APIs we should have. And so Aneka, these Aneka services, these are going to provide with a comprehensive extensive set of APIs and administrative. So these are some of the programming and management tools which you are going to have. So next, apart from this one, you are going to have the different services which are going to have Aneka SDK is there. So Aneka provides APIs for developing applications for existing programming models. It's the same thing we are going to tell here. SDK is software development toolkits. So those SDKs, what they are going to have, they are going to support for both programming models and the services by means of the application model and the service model. Okay, so these are some of the services which are provided by your Aneka. So next is application model. You are going to have the supports the distributed execution in the cloud, the abstraction of programming models. Okay, so it is going to provide the support for distributed applications in the cloud. So next is a programming model identifies what it is going to identify. It is going to identify both the abstraction used by the developer and the runtime support for the execution of programs on top of Aneka. Okay, so these are some of the features which is your application model is going to provide you. Okay, so and then some of the management tools are there. So when you are going with respect to the management tools in Aneka, so Aneka is a pure PaaS implementation. You should know that whenever the Aneka comes into the mind, you are having Aneka is nothing but a pure PaaS implementation and requires virtual or physical hardware to be deployed. So virtual hardware is nothing but what? So public cloud. Physical hardware is nothing but what? It should be a private one. So either it requires the virtual or physical hardware to be deployed. So in infrastructure management together which facilitates for installing the logical clouds on such infrastructure. So if you want to run any of the development platform, infrastructure is must to be there. So the infrastructure can be in your own organization. So if it is in the one organization, then it will become a private cloud. So if we are relying on the virtual infrastructure, that is from renting from the other, then it will become the public cloud. Okay. So the layer also includes capabilities of managing services and applications running in the Aneka cloud. So there are some of the management which are going to have. One is infrastructure management. So that is going to leverage physical or virtual hardware in the order to deploy Aneka clouds. Next is our platform management. So it is nothing but a collection of connected containers. Okay. So it is platform on top of which applications are executed. So these are some of the for services which our Aneka is providing, and it is going to manage. The management APIs provide administrative monitoring and profiling features. Okay, and that help them track the usage of resources. Okay, so that is all about your Aneka. So in the next class, just I will show you how to create an instance in AWS. So just a practical session, one practical session. I'm going to do it. So on Monday, I will teach you how to create an instance in your Amazon and how to deploy and how to use that particular Amazon instances. So anybody having any doubt with respect to the Aneka cloud? So if you know the cloud basics, then learning the cloud with respect to the different vendors is not that much difficult. Okay. So only thing is you should know the basics of your cloud thoroughly. So if you know the basics of your cloud thoroughly, then the top layer, it will not be that much issue. So anybody having any doubt? You can ask.